Hey there, welcome to episode 35 of the FFS Talk audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo. We are recording this at about 11:30 in the morning on July 25, 2024. It's a Thursday, here in Vegas anyway. Today we're going to talk about news and knowledge. Yes, I did just cover, I had an episode recently, I believe it was episode 26, News to Me. It was a little bit of a similar take, but there's some interesting things going on that make another sort of angle on this, I think, worthwhile. So episode 35, News and Knowledge. Hopefully wherever you found this audio program and wherever you find all of your audio programs, podcasts and whatnot, you're able to find an episode description in which I have placed a show summary, which I will read to you, and the links associated with this particular episode. So let's begin by reading that summary. These are interesting times, and keeping track of how interesting how interesting they are, can be a challenge when there are so many people and robots telling us how interesting, for different reasons, and with different agendas, what to do. I should have said telling us how interesting. Poorly placed intonation. The take home, there's a lot of stuff going on, and how on earth are we supposed to keep track of it? If we want to know things, there's so many. News is a shorthand sort of for information, data, alerts, notifications, commentary, analysis, and so on. So the news media in whatever form, alternate news media, etc. There is only more and more every day. And we still have only one, as far as I'm aware, only one brain to deal with it. So today's links, as usual, the first two, shameless self-promotion, buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo, and Ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/Dan Hugo. You don't have to spend any money. There's no obligation. These are useful for posting links, and the Buy Me a Coffee site uses like a profile page, which is convenient. It's a little bit easier to be more detailed than with something like a link tree. Ko-fi.com is more of like I would say it's more of like an announcement site. So I'm starting to use these a little bit more. So check them out. There are links to all of my different projects, content creation, audio program production, and GitHub repositories, and a couple of other things on the buymeacoffee.com profile page, and as well some of my favorite coffee beans that I buy more often. I actually cannot get my favorite coffee beans because they're in Hungary. Go figure. So yeah, buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo, Ko-fi.com/Dan Hugo. You are not obligated in any way to buy or spend money on anything, but if you do know that all proceeds do go to coffee, which powers all of my projects. I have a dictionary definition link for the word wonk. I don't know if I'll use the word wonk in this context today, but it is interesting to know. You will hear sometimes policy wonk, politics wonk, etc. Wonk is somebody who's extremely focused and knowledgeable, hopefully trustworthy, hopefully not taken in by too much agenda, so that they are equally informed on the positives and negatives, the left and the right, the reality versus the perception, and so on. So a wonk is somebody who does the deep dive and gets the data, gets the information. If you are hearing someone who calls themselves a politics wonk talking about politics, they may know what they're talking about. So a wonk it's kind of a funny word. I think most people tend to think that they are wonks because they are gathering a lot of followers. They get a lot of likes and traffic and whatnot on their platform of choice, whatever it is, platforms often. But just because people like what you have to say, just because you're popular, doesn't mean you actually do know what you're saying. You are presenting something that people enjoy consuming, whether or not it's true. So I think there's a little bit of a disconnect between valuing what people say or write or create in general, and whether it's accurate, precise, true. So, yeah, be wary of people who are wonks in name only. Is that a wino? The Nyquist frequency. The reason I'm saying I've put a Wikipedia link here. You can read all about the Nyquist frequency if you like. There's a theory that you need to sample. Well, it's not a theory. I mean, the Nyquist frequency is part of the Nyquist-Shannon information theory about sampling theory on information. If you have some digital information, or analog, but digital especially, you have, when you sample it, well, let me amend this slightly. If you have analog data and you are sampling it digitally, and the same is true of digital information if you want to resample it, you must take the highest frequency. So a CD-ROM, 44.1 kilohertz, I think it is. I think DAT is 48 kilohertz. So you must sample at twice that highest frequency. So if you are listening to some music and you would like to create a digital audio file destined for a CD, you could sample at 88.2 kilohertz and you will get a reasonable reconstruction of the original signal in digital form and put it on the CD and play it all day. So the key, though, is that the more things are changing, the frequency, the higher you must check. So I'm maybe being too on the nose with this one, but things are changing every day all the time, and you must check twice as often as they change or more, 4 times, 8x. What happens if you don't? Well, the Nyquist frequency is the point at which you will stop getting what's called aliasing in your signal. Your input signal might be a nice pure sine wave, but your output signal is going to be what's called a recurring phasor at the frequency of your sine wave. I know that sounds crazy, but the point is, if you sample at 2x, you will filter out those aliases. You'll filter out that extra information. You can refer to it as noise, perhaps, the stuff you don't want. But if you don't sample at 2x, the frequency of your sine wave, you end up with extra stuff that you didn't anticipate. And so this is my way of analogizing the notion that if you are not keeping up with and at 2x the rate of the stuff coming in to you through various social media channels and alternative news media outlets and major media outlets, the traditional mainstream media, as they call it, if you're not checking these things, if you're not analyzing, measuring, consuming them with this 2x factor in mind, it's not exactly 2x in this case, but stick with me. You are subject to being influenced by extra noise because you're not keeping track with how fast things are changing and the way they are being presented. So it's an analogy, but I think it's reasonably useful to keep this in mind, that you must be quicker than the information flying at you. And that becomes even more difficult as there are more and more and more YouTubers and Twitch streamers and blogging is hopefully will make a comeback. But tweeting, Facebooking, TikTokers. So many people are offering their opinions. You have this fire hose, a storm, a completely dominant wave front coming in at you with all kinds of stuff changing all the time. Who knows what's going on? And you have to actually try to pick out what you're going to believe and what you're going to trust and what you're going to make use of in your decision making. It can be tricky. And if you accept the analogy, you have to do it faster than what's coming in. And that can be tricky. Lies and truths. I've put a quote investigator link. It was actually kind of interesting, just for curiosity's sake. A lot of background in this one. There's an expression that's been attributed to various people, as it says right at the top of the article. Mark Twain. What's his name? Jonathan Swift. Is it Jonathan Swift? Do I still have the page open? No, I don't. Well, anyway, I think it was Jonathan Swift. Winston Churchill. And then it goes into great detail. These are quote wonks very clearly. But the expression is something along the lines of, I mean, it changes, paraphrased, depending on who. Even Thomas Jefferson is given credit for it. Lies travel around the world when truth is putting its pants on, while truth is still putting its boots on, etc. And the point is, it's really easy to generate lies because you can just generate them all day and spread them around far and wide. But to actually characterize the truth, to describe it in what would end up being true, you actually have to investigate. You actually have to gather truth and package it up in a truthful way. And that takes so much longer. So lies or propaganda, if you like, can travel around the world. And at the same time, it takes truth to put its boots or pants on. Hopefully both. It's actually kind of an interesting rundown on the history, the alleged history anyway. Who can be completely sure? And then I have a link to yellow journalism. If you're not familiar with yellow journalism, I will say when I first, I think I was probably in high school when we were talking about this. I think there was the notion that yellow journalism had to do with the paper being yellow. That's where the name came from, but it actually came from the Yellow Kid, which was a comic strip. But the take home is that when journalism becomes an issue of dominating a readership market for the sake of monetization, to become the sole trusted news source so that you can make money, profit, you begin to do some unsavory things with your competition. And if you read the Wikipedia article, you can start with Wikipedia, but don't necessarily end there. But they go into the Spanish-American War and how each of the two competing papers, and I'll leave it to you to read which ones. And of course there were more, but the big two were doing things to make sure that they were the news source for the particular war and the details that followed and so on. So it's kind of an interesting notion, and it pretty much applies to today in at scale. Anyone can dominate if you are creative enough. That doesn't mean you have to be true. And in fact, much like I am producing this audio program in my technically at my software engineering desk. I don't have a studio or anything, but I have a microphone. I put it near my computer. I have software projects that I'm working on, and then I just open up Audacity and record a show. I don't wander around the world interviewing people, gathering information. So I'm kind of doing some meta-analysis. I'm taking the work of others, references, and so on, and constructing an episode, maybe a narrative or maybe an opinion piece, completely opinion, which this one is today, on a particular topic, and then recording it. So I'm not doing journalism. I'm not doing wonkish investigations. And you'll find that most people that are creating content nowadays are doing that. Now, some have a level of expertise. They have a history such that they can engage directly with the people that are doing the primary source material, investigations, and so on. So that's a little bit different. But it is sort of important, I think, to know who is telling you what and why. Something to think about through the course of this episode, at least. So there are so many things. We're starting the episode now. And if you're not aware of what FFS means, you need to meet more Irish people. What works, what doesn't, and what can we do about it? And unfortunately, that final part for this episode is not good. It's not looking like much. There are so many things. There are a lot of things going on in the world today, and that's been true for a great many years, decades, all around the world, in fact, where the lies are flying in keeping with the quote. And all the time, 24/7, the 24-hour news cycle, as they used to say, which has always been a thing forever, since 24-hour news cycle, silly. But the question is, how do you know? How do you know things are going on in the world? You read, you watch, you listen. It's the news, it's commentary, it's a YouTuber or a Twitch streamer probably reacting to some other news or YouTube or streamer. But what is news? Previously in episode 26, as I said, news to me, it was about news reporting, and I was comparing some court cases and the motivation and the agenda and the need to be first, or the need to come out with the most sensational opinions and or take hot takes, etc. But the information and how it is presented are important in shaping what we think we know, and that's sort of what we're going to talk about today. So in my opinion, you can learn a lot about your local goings-on, like what's happening in your neighborhood, your communities, your city, your county, by consuming your local news media. But you can also, in most cases, depending on transportation and so on, you can actually go to the place, go to see the thing, go to talk to the people. Sometimes even your government officials are accessible. You could probably have a meeting with your mayor, or your city council is even easier, usually. But you can probably meet up. You might even know them already because they're basically from where you live. So engaging with people that are running the show and probably making some news every once in a while, you can engage them. You can actually talk to them, or you can talk to people who talk directly to them, and so on. So you can find out for yourself. You can be your own reporter, maybe even your own journalist. The most interesting observations you can make, perhaps, are the differences, though, between what you find out directly. Maybe you go and you look at the building, or you read the sign that they're talking about, or you observe the graffiti or the road construction or whatever it is. Then you can look at what you're learning or being told by your local news outlets, and maybe by other local content creators. So they could be the real news. No, they could be like a commercial, mainstream, or even alternative, but a news company. The business they are in is reporting, journalism, reporting, and so on. Or maybe an alternative media outlet that doesn't have their own reporters and journalists, etc. So they're meta reporting and they're providing commentary. But either way, you can actually look at what's showing up in the your local news, and then you can compare that to the regional or national news reporting. Here in Vegas, where I live, very often things that happen here will make the national news because so many people come to Vegas. 40 million tourists visit the greater Vegas area, according to the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. The run rate for 2024 is 40,000, maybe slightly more, 40 million, or slightly more, 41 million. So with so many people visiting from other places, it makes the news sometimes when there's news being made. So you can actually take a look at how things are summarized, how things are simplified, maybe how some things are left out. Some details may not quite make it into the paper or into the news reporting on TV or the internets. You may not have the time or wherewithal, though, to take the time and the moving around and the tracking down the right person and so on. So we delegate the responsibility of gathering information and sharing it, maybe even analyzing it and filtering it, unfortunately, to professional journalists and reporters. I know a couple of them here in the greater Vegas area, and which is why I would rather talk directly to primary sources. But now everybody is doing it. So everybody could be doing it for themselves, but why not make money? Thanks to YouTube and Twitch, what did I write there? I don't know what I wrote there. Thanks to YouTube and Twitch, and of course Twitter and all of the related, maybe I wrote TikTok. I wrote it. Let me edit that real quick. Let me type that correctly, in fact. Twitter in its early days. So Twitter in its early days used to be a place where people in some of the more difficult situations in different parts of the world could post. They could post a picture or a video. Eventually they got videos. So you could actually tell a story. Citizen journalism was becoming popular. So Twitter was this bridge between reality and the story that was being told. Very interesting idea. not quite that anymore, really, when you think about it. Now, there are some people who say, oh, but news breaks on Twitter. It only breaks on Twitter because that's where you find it. News breaks where somebody who's breaking the news shares it. So Twitter is kind of low hanging fruit, but it's also like going to the garbage dump and sharing your news there. So it's rife with, it's lousy with robots and automated posting and agenda posting, and not to mention unpleasantries of various kinds. So you can find all manner, though, of reporting on events anywhere, mundane, critical, and tragic. And that is what social media is now, because social media is between that and then actual appeals to sense, foodie pics, fashion, model photos, etc. So those are all about monetization in some way. And then there's news with an agenda, so you can break news with a TikTok video. Hey, here's what's happening. Well, you're only seeing their take on it. It's not really analysis so much as a few seconds or whatever the limit is on TikTok now, a minute of video that tells a part of a story, but who knows which part. Since it is possible, even easy at this point, to monetize any content one creates, so long as there is an engaged audience to consume it, as long as you have likes and shares and views and comments, click that like button, smash that subscribe button, all those tropes. Making sensational content as early as possible, as soon as something enters any level of public awareness, is a matter of making money. So the sooner you can get your opinions out there, especially some secret knowledge, conspiracy theory type stuff. And conspiracy theory is overused, but let's face it, during any event over the last month, so it's July 25, so any event over the last month has been absolutely fertile ground for speculation, and let's get a video immediately about that. Let's do a Twitch live stream reacting to somebody else doing a video about that. So the more chaos is going on, the more interesting things become, and so people want to create content. I've heard or read, or generally it makes sense. I've come to know somehow that, and it does make sense, that people who have been YouTubers for a long time, Tom Scott, Matt Pat, and his wife, I believe it's Stephanie, and so the game theory guy, food theory, film theory. These people, they've kind of retired. They make these heartfelt videos, and they're like, it gets to the point where everything becomes content ideas. Like, oh, we can do a video about this. And at some point they're so drawn in that they lose track of what's just actually normal stuff that is not worthy of doing a video. I find that both interesting and somewhat sad. But as soon as it becomes a thing that might be interesting, or even more useful, is if you can be just before that happens. So your video is already out there. So you'll be drawn into the algorithm. And I'm sure people have done real work on timing. So I'm not commenting on the precision. I'm just saying that you can get that video out there, make a claim about polls or historical, we're talking politics, right? So we're in the season of all seasons, so often, never in my lifetime, and so on. No one's remembering 1968. Nobody's remembering a variety of historically interesting and relevant things. So it's just we're looking through the big end of a telescope. So everything seems so far away and in a little tiny circle. Content creators are not held to any journalistic standards. So whatever they say, as long as it gets clicks and likes and so on, even if they're wrong, no one is going to go back and say, you need to retract this statement that you made in a video 3 months ago. Not going to happen. Sometimes those with some ethics will go through and edit or apologize or annotate or somehow indicate that they were not quite correct. This will actually more often happen with reviews. Tech reviews will more often get an update than a false claim or a claim proven to be false over time. Thus getting some content out first using words like reporting. We're reporting on this today, giving the impression that they are doing the work of actual journalists and reporters. So they're breaking a story, they're reporting it to you, they're doing it quickly, they're first, they broke the story first. And it's like, well, they're not journalists and reporters. They are making money by doing those jobs, but they don't have the whole picture. And I'm really talking about journalistic ethics, and you can actually take classes in journalism and you can learn about ethics and you can learn about sourcing and learn about how you do investigative journalism, what that really means. And reporting on facts, really you should be reporting on facts, not getting opinionated. You'll often see a mixture of opinions and facts, mostly opinions. But if you're entertaining, you will get the likes and the views and so on. So engagement matters. And if you tell a story that's more scintillating, you'll probably get to tell the story more often than the people who actually know what's happening. You may, in fact, be constructing your entire show, your entire presentation around the work of others. And the good people will give credit. They will attribute their production to others. And when you don't and people find out, then Illuminati. Is that her name? That kind of stuff happens. Anyway, when circulation trumps reality, that's when it gets to be a problem. Ideology and identity can be powerful hooks to draw people in and keep them. That's why people watch their favorite cable news network. That's why people favor their favorite YouTuber or Twitch streamer. It's exciting. Get the dopamine hit. Get the adrenaline rush when people fight. Get in on the chat room and make your opinions known to your fellow fans, or get banned because you said something they don't like. They all tell a version of the story that hold their interest, and you get your engagement if you are a creator. So as long as you can hold people's interest and you get your engagement, they are basically powering your revenue streams. So it's important to maintain those. Using soft, non-specific language, especially relative language, makes telling a version of a story, a version of a truth as a story, easier. Saying something is worse or the worst without actually measuring values. You can see this nowadays. The economy is the worst, or the economy is the best. The U.S. economy is the best in the world. Our recovery from the pandemic is the best of any country. It's the worst economy in history. These are very inflammatory. Well, they're inflammatory depending on which side of the truth you think you're on, but without providing real numbers. Now, some people do provide real numbers. You can get the data on which these claims are made, and you can judge for yourself. It's not the worst. It probably is pretty close to the best. It depends on which period of time. You can choose a period of time where maybe the Italian economy was doing a little bit better. But the bottom line is you can actually find data and make your own assessment, but it's easier and more exciting to be a part of the back and forth. No, we're the best. No, we're the worst. And of course that has political motivations to it with the election coming up. So when you use these terms, or something that always bothers me, and it should bother you, the worst word to ever appear in any headline is another, because it assumes that you know how many of whatever it is already happened or already are. If 1 bar of gold is found, let's keep it nice, let's keep it happy. 1 bar of gold is found, and then the next day another bar of gold is found, and then the next day another bar is found, and then eventually it's you're like, wait, I don't even know how many are found. You have to have been keeping up, otherwise another sounds, well, it could be good or it could be bad. We don't know how. We don't know greatest or worst. 3 more bars of gold found. Okay, but how many were there? And obviously you can apply this to the worst circumstances of people who are in wars, war-torn situations, plane crashes, etc. So using these relative terms keeps people engaged without telling them specifics. And in a proper news outlet's reporting, you will find the actual number buried down several paragraphs, but the headline is the thing that gets you in. And by the way, most of the time, and in professional journalism or print media especially, the headline is not written or created. It's not composed by the the person who wrote the article. Those are the editors who are choosing the layout of the page, and they're like, oh, we got room to fit this many letters in the headline. We want a real hero box up there. Just say another or two more. So it gets tricky, but it makes it really easy to manipulate the response to such a headline or such a statement. And this is why you will see, you can actually read about this yourself. You can track some of this down. The process of publishing on YouTube and almost certainly other platforms includes the possibility of changing the thumbnail, changing the title. So you can find out pretty quickly whether people are clicking on your video to watch it. And then you can change the title and or the image that they see, and see if your engagement goes up, because those things matter, just like a headline on a print media, or just like the lead or the deck, I guess, in a video form. Whenever you see a cold open, like another gold bar was found, and then they start the beginning of the show, it's a way to hook you and get you in. So everybody's doing it. I already talked about that. When circulation trumps reality, we've talked about that. Since most people don't have the time to check these claims and statements, and since they typically develop some sort of fandom, so you become a Bill O'Reilly fan or a Jon Stewart fan, and they stopped being credible when they became friends, I think, because they don't hold each other to account. It's too bad. They typically develop some sort of fandom. You become a fan of some reporter. That's kind of weird, but more often it's some talking head on YouTube or Twitch. Maybe you're a fan of Vosh or Destiny or Hassan, or the list goes on. Or maybe you like some of the more right-leaning. Well, they lean all over the place. So you can find someone who speaks the truth to you that you want to hear, and then you will bump their numbers up. So they do well by feeding an ideology or at the very least a particular point of view. It doesn't have to be a whole ideology, but they may have views that you appreciate, and you like confirmation bias. So they don't have to be a wonk. They don't have to know exactly what they're talking about. They just have to know what to tell you. And sometimes they become knowledgeable just by osmosis, because they keep talking about things and they keep hearing about things, and some of it sticks in their head and they form an opinion. Now some they do actual research, and they will present an argument, and they take part in the debate bro culture, and that's a whole nother mess. But what this does is foment this competitive team sport scenario, where you're the fan of your side of the argument and your team has to win, or your favorite player, whatever, however you want to look at it. But end of the day, it all comes down to circulation, getting those engagements, getting the likes, getting the subscriber counts, the comments, the chat rooms, being able to do an ad placement. So some do ad reads. Are they really providing you a service at this point, or are you providing them a service? And they're just feeding you so that you keep coming back. So what might fix this? That is a good question. First of all, you have to ponder that it might be broken. You might think everything's fine. You're getting fed exactly what you want to hear. You feel good about what's going on. You get angry at the things that everybody else is getting angry at. You hate them and you love us, etc., etc. But if you think this needs to be fixed, it will probably work best to start local. So look around your neighborhood and things nearby to be able to compare what is reported. And again, it could be local reporting. It could be local content creators. It could be national media. And again, here in Vegas or any big city, you'll tend to get a lot of coverage of what's happening near you in larger outlets. I can't tell you how many times I read news first as it is printed in LA or in on the East Coast somewhere, or somewhere in Middle America, about Vegas, because everybody has something to say about Vegas. So you can actually look local first and see how stories are told, how things are described, and what is actually happening, where you can actually check for yourself. So you can actually say, they didn't tell that part of the story for some reason. And I've seen this here in Vegas. So this is a practical accounting of things I've actually compared, and you're like, they didn't really mention that the part that makes the story much less positive. And I'll tell you, by the way, I know someone who was a canine officer in the local law enforcement. I don't know if he was LVMPD, but he was associated with law enforcement, canine. So he was telling me one night, I had to crouch behind some obstruction because somebody was shooting at us. I said, where? And he said where it was. I said, is that even in the news? I didn't hear about it. He's like, oh, you don't hear about everything. They don't tell you everything. So that was fairly cynical, but probably more true than we would like. Take some time to compare sources. So identify those with an agenda. Here we have two official, in the Nevada Revised Statutes for Southern Nevada. There are two papers of record, the Review Journal and the Las Vegas Sun. So you can compare those. You can compare the news channels that we have, the classic TV, which they now basically publish on YouTube. And they have websites, and you can read other news sources, the Nevada Independent, and the list goes on. There are various outlets here. Some of them are slanted heavily towards real estate and business, big business. Others are trying to remain independent. They lean left or right. So if you take a look at the variety of sources, you should sort of be able to see the commonalities, and you can check for like, oh, yeah, that really is the situation at that intersection, or that really is the way the construction is unfolding, or that really did happen with the guy shooting at the canine officer. But then you'll find that some of the news sources leave certain things out, or they simplify or filter some things. So the definition of true for you might be the sum of these various sources that you yourself compare. Then you leave out the variation and sensationalism, perhaps, if you're lucky. You might have to actually pull the truth from the clutches of these things. But you hopefully will end up with some notion of what's really happening around you. And you can keep doing this. And over time, you will have a better idea for yourself which of your sources are worthy of your trust, so that you will end up with a reasonably accurate representation of what is happening around you. You can do something similar with your favorite Twitch streamers and whatnot, but it's not as easy, it's not as practical, it's not as realistic to jump on a plane or climb on a boat or somehow get yourself to wherever some other global event is occurring. So you starting local seems more reasonable, more realistic. Realistic, that's the word. So yeah, think local first. And besides, most of the things that are happening in other parts of the world will impact you later, but things that are happening down the street might impact you today. So it's an interesting starting point, I think. But this won't work. Let's be honest. We don't have the time or resources to do all of this all the time. For every source generating dubious content for you, that is dubious to you, some other person with a different ideology or a different viewpoint or a different background of some sort, they may have a completely different take on interpreting what's being told to them. So if you both went down to the origin of the particular story, maybe it's reporting on a park down the street. If you go to the park, you're like, oh, well, they got most of the details right. And the other person might say, well, they got a few more right than wrong. So, but it's in the comparison of source material and origin of story where there may be some value. And that's where some of that discussion might come in handy. But finding people that want to do that with you might be another challenge. So it doesn't really work because we don't have the time to verify all of this stuff. And because every source is a potential dubious source you'd have to check, you would need to check by doing more work than the source and do that for every source to verify their version of some truth. So you have to multiply by the number of sources you're examining, and suddenly you're spending, if you have 10 sources and they each spent an hour constructing their YouTube or Twitch, whatever, you got to spend at least twice that, at the very, probably more, but you got to spend a lot more time and multiply your time of one person by 10 to get, research on each of your sources. So unreasonable. Not only is there a time constraint, but we would obviously become exhausted with the tedium of checking all the time. You would always be fact checking, not to mention the frustration knowing that you will actually never catch up. In fact, you will always fall behind. There's no question if you attempted to do actual research based on every story you were interested in that might affect you, reported by even with one source, because they probably have researchers if they're a professional news organization. But in any case, you are already behind. When you first question anything, you have your work cut out for you. And there are always more sources, more content creators, and of course they're automated robotic overlords, which can move many times faster, doing what you're trying to do. They can examine sources all over the internet and start creating their own content, or they may even do what's called hallucinating, or they may lie to you. They may come up with creative articles that match the algorithm, the statistical analysis of various bodies of work that says, oh, when I see gold, the word that should come after it is bars. They're not doing any real deep dive analysis. The robots are not wonks. That will take a while. So your competition for determining truth is, and you're starting to read about this only more and more, are automated accounts, robots with their own agenda to try to shape public opinion, because you'll start to see the same version of some story over and over and over and over at scale. And it's probably robots. It's probably automated content generated in an appealing way that will match your ideology, even your word choice, your reading preferences, and those can start appearing everywhere. And if you've never heard a YouTube video that is a 100% AI generated script and computer voiceover, it only gets worse. It only gets worse. And I don't know if you could hear the Amazon product chiming in there. So there are always more sources, more content, and that's going to always be true. So consider AI in a different way, perhaps. Suppose you could work with an AI model yourself, and you can if you want to. There's any number of open source and freely available models. You might need some new hardware to run them at a reasonable level of performance, but you can do it. And suppose rather than generating a new text, like, here, summarize these articles for me, and hoping for the best, because that's how content is being created on the internet now. So rather than doing that, suppose and it could be you could be generating an image or video or whatever you're doing. What if you generate a very specific comparison? So you have your AI, you have your chat, whatever, your llama, your Claude, and the list goes on. You have it read, quote unquote read, analyze a particular source, and then actually compare other sources or actual factual source material to try to determine where the statements made in your sample, where they may be deviating, or where certain types of language that lean a certain way, where a particular ideology may be creeping into the way a story is being told. So you actually analyze the story in isolation compared to other sort of a bolus of knowns, a collection of texts that you tend to agree with or you tend to understand where they're coming from, etc. So you classify a particular source as credible, not credible, left-leaning, right-leaning. And some people are doing this already, so it's not outlandish. But what you're really after, not necessarily their leanings, but how often they craft a truth around actual truth, maybe leaving some things out, maybe selecting words that have a sort of vagueness to them, leaving out specific references. Why is this person the best or the worst? No reason to believe, because you're just making a naked statement without anything backing it up. So, and the technology exists, the RAG stuff. You can actually have a model that can check other sources, other information, other references. So a final version of some news reporting could come of this for you. You may have a model that works for you. You have trusted samples on which you've trained it. And this all sounds like, oh, I could never do that. But it will become automated enough that you could. Not everybody knows how to train a dog, and yet people end up with dogs that can be well behaved if you interact with the dog as a dog owner relationship forms and so on. So there's a difference between teaching a dog tricks and teaching a dog to just behave like a part of the household, and so on. So you do something similar with your own AI. You would actually trust the output, trust the summaries and the classifications and so on. But let's stop right there, because this will take some proaction on your part. Only you know your own agenda. You still need to be aware of what you choose to believe and why. And while training an artificial intelligence model may help with that, you actually have to take that proactive interest in doing so, and then you have to know on what you're training it. The moment you allow someone else, and you're still trusting the code does what you think it does, but the moment you allow third parties to do your training and analysis, you are subject to the agenda, if any. And how would you know? It will be, so the bottom line is this: it will be a long while before you are tuning your own models to provide you with some version of a truth that may or may not be in the distant future. It may be very near, depending on which news source you believe. Some say it's months away, some say it's years away. It will happen, and you will be able to train your own models eventually, and you may be able to train them on information you trust to begin developing a classifier or a workflow, if you will, that can help you to discover and determine what is true or what is accurate, or on what details you should base real consequential decisions. You might be casting a ballot soon. Maybe you're making an investment that's really critical to your long-term future. Selecting a source of food and beverage so that they're safe and nutritious. The list goes on. We tend to trust others for the information we use to make these profoundly consequential decisions. But should we? And how do we even know? So while the economics of proactive truth-seeking do tend to favor the effort, you do get something for your time. So spending the time in the ways I've described is actually economically favorable to a point. I mean, you do get something back. Unfortunately, as content creation in general has become vastly overwhelming, it's become vast and overwhelming. The investment you need to make for that economic return, right? The economy of the way you spend your time. You have to invest more and more time and effort to get the return. So we have to automate that in some way, because you can't do it manually. It becomes untenable if you personally have to check and go and visit locations and so on, as I was describing earlier. So it is the use of the technologies that are fast overtaking everything. Everything is about AI. If you're going to start a company, it better have AI in it, even if it's... I saw this comic, little cell, like a humor, and it was a party boat, and there's a whole crowd of people, and there's partying and celebrating and so on. And someone says, "How did you ever get funding for this?" And the other person says, "Oh, I just told them the name of the project." And the boat is named AI. So all manner of excitement and trust is being thrown at these tools, and the companies making them. So we'll see how things turn out. But over time, if we can automate the interface to our world in such a way as we can trust it, it may be that we can develop our own knowledge base that actually has some sort of meaning and is not full of agenda and propaganda. This is concerning to me. It is, if you've listened to my other programs, the Cafe Genius Impresarios, I've been discussing one of my startup efforts concerns local information sharing. So this is reasonably topical, apropos to things I'm focusing on. But I think the generated news, the generated opinion pieces, the wonks that are not really wonks, people who pretend to know what they're doing or are given credibility, the credibility halo is set atop their head when they really don't know what they're talking about. It is only because they are popular that they are presumed to be credible. And this doesn't really go well. So it's a concern. It's something to think about. I hope you will think about it as well. And that will bring us to an end of this episode of the FFS Talk audio program. Don't forget to check out buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo and Ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/DanHugo for more of my content, my wonkishness. No, what do I know? I don't know what I'm talking about. Hopefully you do. And one of these days, if we ever get guests back on, maybe one of them will be you. Who knows? Never had guests on this show, but there's no reason we couldn't. We should. We should talk about your views on any of these various topics. Think about it. That's where I'm going to leave it because I really need to get some water. Take care.